Call to order the meeting, October 20th, meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. This meeting is being streamed live and recorded as a public record. A recording of the meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.org. As a courtesy that others, please turn off their cell phones during the meeting. At this time, I call on Commissioner Brad Stanback to lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
See flag anywhere.
We'll pretend we have.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'll call on Commissioner Hayden Rogers for invocation.
Let's bow our heads. Our Heavenly Father, we come to you today from a position of gratitude. We're grateful, Father, for your love, your Son, and your forgiveness. We're grateful for the resources and the creation that you have blessed us with in this wonderful state that we live in. We're thankful, Father, for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, our host, the relationship we have with them, the partnership we have. And God, we're grateful for our family and our friends and all the wonderful memories and opportunities that you have given us, whether that be on a creek bank, in a blind, in a boat, or around a campfire. Those are the memories, Fathers, that I think, Father, that we take with us and we enjoy and we appreciate, we romanticize as time goes on. God, never let us lose sight of the tremendous responsibility we have to try to shepherd care of your resources and guide us as we make those decisions. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Amen. This time I'll be mandatory that required North Carolina General Statute 130A. 15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and appearances of conflict under this chapter. That the chair also requires as to whether there is known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any written matters coming before the commission at this time. It is the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or an appearance of conflict to notify the chair of the same. Is there any conflict or appearance of conflict with the this time period? I'll call on Margo for roll call of commissioners present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do the roll call for commissioners present. Connie Cross,
Here.
Tommy Humble,
Here.
Dave Hoyle, John Coley, Wes Sears,
Here.
Mark Craig, Tom Barry, Brad Stanback,
Here.
Jim Rowan,
Here.
Ray Clifton,
Here.
Kelly Davis, here, Steve Wyndham,
Here.
Landon Zimmer,
Here.
John Snow,
Here.
Hayden Rogers,
Here.
John Alexander,
Here.
Tom Paisley,
Here.
J.C. Cole,
Here.
Mike Allen.
You've already been approved, you've already been given the minutes of the meeting for August 11th, August 18th, September the 13th, all of 2022 for your review. Any changes, at this time I'll ask for any changes. Outline. Here none, I'll ask for a motion to approve exhibit A, B, and C, which are all of the amendments that I just went back.
Second.
Motion, second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, minutes are approved. This time I'll call DB Singular for financial status report. DB.
Morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving us the opportunity to present the Wildlife Commission financial status report as of August 31st, 2022. In Q1, the total revenue was $20,692,245.47, and the total expenditures were $21,779,875.05. The fund balance was $18,254,756.91. In the capital improvement fund, the total revenue was $1,687,948.09, and expenditures was $3,029,457.12. And the fund balance was $1,940,326.78. Endowment fund, the fund balance is $149,830,940.78, with the allocation of 38% in fixed income and 62% in equities. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the Commission's financial staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, DP. Are there any questions or comments from any of the commissioners reference the financial staff report? Hearing none, thank you, DP.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This time we'll move forward to committee reports. I'll call on Wes Seegers, our Rules Committee Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Rules Committee held an out-of-cycle meeting on September 13th, 2022, to review rules proposed for the 23-24 annual rulemaking cycle. First, Terry Barnes introduced 12 proposed changes to inland management, and after discussion, the committee recommended moving forward with 11 proposals. Christian Waters followed up with proposals for rules for inland fishing. 9 proposals were presented, and all were recommended to move forward. Lastly, Brad Howard introduced proposed wildlife management rule changes for the committee, recommended moving forward with all 8 proposed changes. The final rule proposal will be for 2023-24 rule cycle will be presented at the meeting today and voted notice of text open for public comment.
Any questions, Rules Committee report? Hearing none, we'll now Migratory Birds Walkout Committee, Vice Chair Wes Seegers, your deputy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Migratory Bird and Waterfowl Committee met yesterday to receive several interesting updates and reports from Doug, Migratory Bird Management Coordinator. Doug presented a brief update on the Dove Hunter Opinion Survey that just closed. Next up, Doug shared information with us about black belly cliff duck range expansion and documentation breeding in North Carolina. Finally, Doug gave a very good report on the recent American black duck study and all the interesting information learned about North Carolina's breeding black duck population. After no further business, the committee adjourned, and there were no action items to be sent by the committee.
Are there any questions or comments? Migratory Bird Walkout Committee report. Hearing none, we move to Fisheries Committee report, Chairman Song.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The meeting was called to order at 9:48 quorum, so we proceeded with the meeting. We started out with Powell Wheeler, District 9 fisheries biologist, providing a new stocking effort report to maintain smallmouth bass in Fontana Lake and Lake James that began in the spring of this year and over the next few years. Staff will continue stocking, monitoring the population to evaluate the efficiency of the effort. We then got a report from Jake Rash, Mountain Region Coldwater Fisheries Research Coordinator. He presented an update on how other state, federal, and tribal agencies across the Southeast manage catch and release stock trout fisheries, or what we refer to as trophy waters. Chris Wood, the District 8 fisheries biologist, then provided an overview of walleye management throughout reservoirs in western North Carolina, where invasive trout species introduction, especially river herring, have created challenges for walleye recruitment. Christian Waters then provided an update on fishery species management plans that are under development, which include reservoir striped bass and bodie bass, black bass, trout, and walleye. Christian then shared that trout will be available this year for the winter trout small impoundment stocking program, which provides trout for small impoundments as far east as Tarboro. Christian also explained that estuarine striped bass management is scheduled to be discussed at the November Marine Fisheries Commission meeting. Additional update will likely be provided at the December Commission meeting. All in all, Mr. Chairman, it was a very good meeting. It was had a lot of interesting presentations, and the committee didn't have to make any hard decisions.
Are there any questions or comments concerning the Fisheries Committee report, Chairman Song? Hearing none, we move forward to Finance Committee report, Chairman Lansdowne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Finance Committee met yesterday, October 19th, 2022,
starting with CFO, Dr. D.P. Singla, presenting a comparison of the current fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2022 for periods ending in August, showcasing both revenues and expenditures for the general and capital improvement funds. Explanations were provided for any variances of more than $1 million. In addition to explaining the earning details in the bond index fund and equity index fund, the committee also reviewed the balances and asset allocation of the endowment fund as of August 2022. Then Engineering Chief Gary Gardner presented a 4-year forecast of capital improvement projects where endowment funds would be needed. This 4-year forecast equals almost $47 million, with the Samarkand facility being about $10 million and the Setzer hatchery being about $35 million. Gary's presentation was then followed up by Dr. D.P. Singla, who discussed the bond index fund and equity index fund ratios. Finally, the Finance Committee agreed to continue the transfer of funds from the bond index fund to equity index fund in the amount of $2 million each month for 12 months, starting in the month of November 2022. And we'll assess again next year in 2023. In order to ratify that transfer, there needs to be a motion to transfer $2 million per month from the bond index fund to the equity index fund for 12 months, beginning in November 2022.
I so moved.
Second. Got a motion, and a second, Brad Sandback. Well, all right, any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my, pardon me?
Was there no?
Yeah, I voted no.
That concludes my report.
Any further questions, comments, Finance Committee? Here now, we go to big game committee report, Chairman Dave Hoyle.
Game met yesterday, October 20th, big game committee received a presentation from our lead social scientist, Dr. Christina Watkins, on the recent completed elk landowner survey. James Homerman, Wildlife Management Division, Mountain Regional Operations Supervisor, then updated the committee on the current ongoing efforts of the CWD work both statewide and most specifically in the surveillance area. Finally, we received an update from Jessica Ronstein, the doctoral student from the University of Tennessee, who gave us an overview and update of the current elk population estimation and modeling work. All the field sampling work has been completed. The final report should be finished by next spring.
Are there any questions for Chairman Hoyle? Report. Here none, I'll get to the report. Committee Cole meeting yesterday at 2 o'clock. Meeting again with the presentation of the 23-24 annual cycle rules for notice of text and the proposed adoption of temporary rules for the surveillance areas of CWD. Next, we received incredibly valuable updates from our partners in the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian, our Natural Resources Director Mike Boyd, United States Forest Insurance by National Forest and North Carolina Forest Supervisor James Lawrence, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, our wildlife technician Ryan Williams. Next, the committee received a very informative update from Hannah Plumpton on rough grouse and an update on rabbit hemorrhagic disease from Brad Howard. And other business, Darren Barnes gave a brief update on the agency activities for the small game land initiative. Finally, after a few housekeeping items, there will be no other business. The meeting was adjourned at 3:20. Questions? Meeting closed. You're done. I'll move forward and recognize Cameron, our Director, Executive Director Cameron. Special presentation.
Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome everybody. Welcome our distinguished guests. It is my pleasure this morning to present one of the Wildlife Commission's most prestigious awards, the Thomas L. Clay Wildlife Diversity Award. This award is presented to someone who has made outstanding contributions to wildlife diversity in North Carolina and considered a leader in wildlife resources conservation. Today, we are honoring the 17th Quay Wildlife Diversity Award recipient. Mrs. Jean Beasley is well known by the conservation community for for her efforts to rehabilitate and improve conservation measures benefiting sea turtles. I also happen to know that this week is Miss Beasley's birthday, so happy birthday. In attendance, we have some other guests, and if I miss anybody, I'm sorry, but we have Barney Beasley, the son of Miss Beasley, Dr. Craig Harms, and Dr. Gregory Leopard from Lamar, excuse me if I mispronounced that, from North Carolina State University College of Veterinary Medicine, and some colleagues virtually. Welcome all of you. I'll now read the resolution of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission honoring Ms. Beasley. Whereas Jean Beasley is a resident of North Carolina and an award-winning sea turtle conservationist. And whereas Jean Beasley has worked diligently to promote and foster sea turtle conservation efforts in the state of North Carolina and internationally. And whereas Ms. Beasley has provided exemplary leadership for the conservation of sea turtles in North Carolina since the 1980s, serving as volunteer coordinator for Topsail Island Sea Turtle Project and founding director of the Karen Beasley Sea Turtle Rescue and Rehabilitation Center in Surf City. And whereas Ms. Beasley has provided extensive training and development opportunities in sea turtle conservation and rehabilitation for students of all ages and many different backgrounds from grade school through graduate school. And whereas Ms. Beasley has partnered with research collaborators from various states and internationally to successfully conduct research for the benefit of sea turtle rehabilitation. And whereas Ms. Beasley has served on various committees, including the North Carolina Sea Turtle Advisory Committee, and on various boards, including the International Sea Turtle Society, and as a representative of sea turtle volunteers and for the benefit of sea turtle conservation in North Carolina and elsewhere. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission does hereby pay tribute to Jean Beasley for her outstanding contributions that inspired generations of North Carolinians and advanced the understanding of the state's sea turtles and their coastal habitats. And be it further resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission expresses its profound gratitude to Jean Beasley and presents her with the Thomas L. Clay Wildlife Diversity Award for her exemplary leadership in the enhancement and conservation of North Carolina's non-game wildlife resources. This resolution was introduced by Chairman Monty Crump and unanimously passed by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission in a meeting duly assembled on October 20th, 2022 in Cherokee, North Carolina. Congratulations. I would like to call up Dr. Craig Hall in the next presentations that I'm doing. Sorry, I didn't tell you about that. Surprise, surprise. But I would like to invite Ms. Beasley up for me to give her her awards. And first, I'm going to present her with a resolution and the wooden quake plaque. And also something a little special that's up here today is a canvas, a photo canvas image of how Jean leads the release up to the ocean of a silver-adult loggerhead sea turtle that was successfully rehabilitated at the Sea Turtle Hospital at Topsail Island. This is an incredible photo right here on canvas that was put together by artists from Pender County, North Carolina, in our home state. So we would like to present her with all those, and then we'll get some photos after we complete. So, I do understand that there was some challenges for getting here to Cherokee, North Carolina, that y'all endured through a long trip with possible car issues. But thank you so much for being here.
I want to tell you the greatest thing was coming through the Great Smoky Mountains. It was just wonderful to drive through there because I've been to Case Cove, but not the whole route. So I would also like to just say a word here, if I may. We are in a time schedule, but I've dealt so much with.
Get a microphone for that.
And Craig knows I'm always going to grab the microphone. But I do want to say a thank you to a lot of people who are not here today. that are the agents for the Wildlife Resources Commission. Some of you are here. I've worked with these people for many, many years, 35, 40, something like that. And I want to tell you one of the greatest people. They are the first line of defense for our wildlife in North Carolina. It is they who are on the line when people are resistant. They can get nasty, they can get ugly. I've seen it. And they keep their cool and they make the situation as good a one as they can, but they see that our wildlife are protected. Today, I think that the assaults on our wildlife are not only still there, but even stronger. And so I want to say my thanks to those agents who are on the front line. It's a front line of defense for wildlife.
Thank you, Ms. Beasley. We're going to do a couple more awards and then we'll get together.
I should take my thanks to everyone.
Mr. Chairman, I conclude my presentation.
At this time, I'll call on Christian Waters to introduce the next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great honor to introduce our next presenter, Ms. Lynn Quattro with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. She is the Assistant Chief of Fisheries down there. She and her agency have been a great friend and partner of the Wildlife Resources Commission. She's here today in her other official role as the President-elect of the American Fisheries Society's Fisheries Administrator section, and she's going to make a special presentation.
Morning, everybody, and thank you for having me back. It's good to be back here. Like Christian said, we in South Carolina have been working with North Carolina folks for my entire career, and count these as important colleagues and great friends, and really admire the work that's being done here in North Carolina, and so does the American Fisheries Society. As Christian said, I'm the President-elect of the Fisheries Administration section. This section gives out 3 sport fish restoration awards every year. As you know, the Sport Fish Restoration Program provides funds that are critical for every state agency as we manage fisheries across the country. The 3 outstanding project of the year awards are given in 3 different categories: fisheries management, research and survey, and aquatic education / R3 activities, recruitment, retention, and reactivation. I am excited to be back here. I was here just a few months ago with a delayed award from 2020, but I am so excited to be back here to present award today in research and survey for the Sportfish Restoration Fund Awards. The work that's being done here in North Carolina is certainly cutting edge. I had heard about this project several months ago and was very excited about it because it is far-reaching, and had been talking with folks across the country in my role at the American Fisheries Society about it. It caused a lot of excitement, and it's outstanding work. The North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, in partnership with the Southeastern Cooperative Fish Parasite and Disease Lab at Auburn University, led the discovery of 3 exotic invasive trout pathogens in the southeastern United States. These pathogens include the causative agent of salmonid whirling disease, known as Nixobolus cerebralis, and 2 species of pathogenic gill lice. Each is of high concern for cold water resource managers regionally. An intended overarching outcome of this agency-university partnership was the creation of region-specific management tools. This project generated groundbreaking information to support management and conservation efforts in North Carolina and abroad. They conducted the most comprehensive study of trout health in North Carolina while developing robust data set for whirling disease epidemiology. They discovered a new species of Mixobolus infected brook trout that is not routinely pathogenic, but nearly identical to Mixobolus cerebralis, which could have led to false positives in diagnostic tests for that disease. They also confirmed that whirling disease has a distinct life cycle in the southeastern United States. This result was transformative to global understanding of the epidemiology and the life cycle of Mixobolus cerebralis, because the distribution of the pathogen is linked to the abundance of their intermediate host. The project also generated pioneering information on 2 parasitic species of gill lice, previously undescribed in the region. I'm happy to present the American Fisheries Society Fisheries Administration Section 2022 Federal Aid in Sport Fish Restoration Award for Research and Surveys to the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission for the project Exotic Invasive Trout Pathogens in North Carolina. Congratulations to Jake and Doug and Christian and everyone else working in the fisheries section. We really appreciate your efforts.
Okay, we'll break for just a few minutes for pictures. Right back up to the photograph. Our meeting is back in session, and we'll move forward now by calling Christian Waters, introduce our presenter for our agency spotlight.
Okay, well, while Mallory pulls up his presentation, I'd like to introduce Jake Rash. Most of y'all know Jake. He's been with us for 17 years in the mountain region. So much of that time, he's been our cold water research coordinator, working with trout species. And he's going to provide an overview today of the history of public mountain trout.
He's a great fishing guy too.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help up here. And certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. We're just going to take a look back at some of the efforts that have taken place here in North Carolina, and particularly through the commission, relative to our trout waters and the activities that we've done with those resources throughout the years. And I want to start here. When we think about fisheries management, but particularly when we think about trout management, it really starts with these 3 elements. And our public mountain trout waters from the beginning has been the intersection of these 3 components, which are the fish, the places that they live, the habitat, and then the people that are enjoying these resources and interacting with these resources. And so when we take a look back or think about trout management in general and what we're trying to even do today, it's how all these things are interacted and how we work with those interactions and these individual elements. And there's no doubt that trout fishing has been a popular activity for a long time here in the mountains of North Carolina. And we see folks pictured here on the bottom, that's over in the Davidson River. And then even staying over in Transylvania County from a 1937 article highlighting the opening of the Pisgah hatchery, which we know today is the Setzer hatchery. So fishing was making the news way back then, and that facility is one that we rely on today. And then also that stocking component and the use of those hatchery systems. You can see this one of our facilities there on the left. Not only was it popular then, but it has remained an integral part of the fisheries activities today. But certainly early on and prior to the formation of the agency, the stocking activities were a central part of trout management. And we can't talk about stockings without referencing the introduction of some of the real popular game fishes that are here today, and out of the brown and rainbow trout. Rainbow trout came to North Carolina in the early 80s from the western United States. And then a few years later, in the early 1920s, brown trout arrived from Europe. And again, these are very common species across our landscape. And I'll talk a little more about that here in a few minutes. But there's also the important note about introductions of brook trout that came down from the hatchery systems up north, late 1880s, early 1900s, in association with a lot of the landscape activities, really intensive logging practices that altered habitats and populations. So we saw introductions of these hatchery fish. Not only did they come down, but they moved throughout the region. Subsequently, we do a lot of work today understanding the effects of those introductions way back when. But again, the hatchery systems continue to play a critical role in our trout management efforts today. And if we look on the right, from taking eggs to milk to fertilized eggs at the bottom, there's a significant process that takes place to get to putting those fish in the water that people love and enjoy. And if we All right, yeah, if we look at, in particular, what we're actually stocking, this is a percentage of the species of fish that we're stocking today. And we're stocking roughly 40% brook trout, 20% brown trout, and 40% rainbow trout throughout our waters that we're managing. But if we take a look at the sizes of these fish through the years, it's a great story and something for us to be proud of as well. If you look in the 70s, the trout we were stocking averaged right around 7 inches. And then we move into the 80s and 90s, and we're over 9 inches on average for the fish we stock. And on the upper right corner, I'm showing you the numbers of fish that we're producing a year. And you can see by the end of the 90s, we're pushing 800,000 trout. But as we get into today, from the 2000s and today, the average fish that we stock is 10.5 inches. 4% of the fish we stock are over 14 inches. So we're really putting out a high quality trout for anglers. And if we look at our numbers in production, we're well over 1 million trout a year. It's not fair to show that little dip at the end. That's the results from the flooding at Setzer last year. But as we've discussed, you know, the dedicated and talented hatchery staff have overcome that obstacle. And it's just been amazing to see them be able to adjust and react, and us to get back on track and putting the numbers back out for folks. Well, we also do a lot of work trying to understand what we have. What are the fish doing? How's fishing going? How are our populations acting out there in the wild? How are those fish we stocking? How are they performing? How can we make the best decisions possible? And we get that understanding through a lot of research and survey efforts. And to do that, we got to get our hands on trout. And so we do that in sometimes they're really, really fun ways, like this picture on the lower right, which is a electric fishing raft that we take down large river systems, like the Nantahala River. Folks are rafting for fun. We sample trout in there. But traditionally, it's like the picture up on the upper right, where that's in the early 90s, we're using backpack electric fishing. And if we see that in action here on the lower left, we're walking up streams, simply able to stun the fish. We collect them, we can weigh them, measure them. If they're brook trout, we'll take a genetic sample from them. We're able to release them and then they're fine. And we may come back later and continue to reassess that population. All that sampling work has given us a lot of data, a lot of information. It's starting in the late 1970s. Bill Bonner really led the charge to look at our populations. And what you see here in red these are wild, self-sustaining trout populations. Brook trout in red, rainbow trout in blue, brown trout in yellow. And over the last couple of decades, we really amassed a lot of information. And this helps us understand how these populations are doing. It helps our partners. It informs a lot of different programs and activities. Particularly within that effort is our work on native brook trout. Brook trout being the trout that's only native to North Carolina. It's obviously a really high biological importance, but culturally and socially, it's really important too. I mean, this is our trout in North Carolina. You talk to anybody in this area, you talk fishing long enough, you're going to get a story about specks up in the hills, up in the valley. And that carries a lot of weight, and that's really important for us as we're working to keep these things for future generations in our mountains. And on the left, you can see where we typically find them, and they're pretty high up in the watershed, 3,000 feet. So it takes work to get to these places. And the work we do is pretty varied, from working back on Byers Creek in the 1960s. This is a rope-known drip. They're essentially poisoning the stream to collect animals. To work on Lake Appalachia, which is as far west as you could go in the state, where we are growing trophy trout, really big brown trout based on the habitat conditions of the lake and the forage that's there. We can really grow big fish in a really cool setting in a lake. So just a lot of variety and diversity in the type of work that we're doing. But we also do a lot of work to assess the people. I just talked a lot about the fish, but we think back to that first slide, fish, the habitat, and the people. We have to have an understanding of our anglers and understanding of their interests, their needs, and values. And we also do work to understand the economic impact of the work we're doing as well. And back in 2014, our last economic survey, it found that our program that the mission manages generated about $383 million for the state's economy. That's certainly important for the state, but as we know locally, that's really important as well. Communities that are integrated into this industry and dependent upon these resources. But what we also find is that in general, our anglers like what we're doing. There's obviously things that we can improve, but by and large, we're getting favorable ratings. And it's not to brag, but that's to help us understand in context what we're doing. The whole is favorable, so there are things that we can tweak. So whenever we get approached with ideas, we can work to put those in context moving forward. And we're also fortunate enough to work with projects that have wide-ranging effects and receive some attention nationally. Some work we did with our brook trout genetics, and then certainly this morning, the work that we're able to do with all of our partners relative to fish pathogens to try to make sure we're keeping our populations healthy. And then thinking about the work we do with people, again, fish, the habitat, the people. I always kind of go back to something I heard former Director Meyer say, and it was in regards to the conservation is something done with people and not to them. And I think the trout program is a shining example of this concept. And a tangible piece of that is our memorandum of understanding that we have with the U.S. Forest Service, with Trout Unlimited and the Wildlife Commission, where way back in 1986, this was agreed upon, and it's a great example for the rest of the country of how we can work together with the public and with our other agencies to manage trout collectively and to help make decisions. And when we talk partnerships, the work on the habitat piece, it really requires it, because it's a lot of work to pull off these projects. And one great example is here working with the North Carolina State Parks and Trout Unlimited to help a native brook trout stream. The situation here is the culvert you see prevented movement. So fish in the lower part of this population were pretty well sandwiched between this culvert and a waterfall. And so they couldn't move. And so what would happen is the gene flow of fish movement is just one way. It can only go downstream. And thanks to the work of the partners, we're able to remove that culvert and establish passage in that reach. And so now fish are able to move freely, meaning they can access each other to spawn. They can access additional habitat that gets too warm downstream and provide that fully functional and healthy system that would have been there before that culvert. And what's great about this is people can keep helping. Our native brook trout license plate, those funds that are generated by that goes directly to this kind of work. And so it's not only do those look great, but when you're riding around and you see these on somebody's car, know that the dollar spent on that can go back on the ground and help make a difference on these projects. And one of the things that has really changed over the years is this angling access component. These agreements are generally a handshake agreement, and I've got a display of a hatchery-supported stream on the left there, and those rectangles represent parcels. Well, back in the 50s and 60s, this streams kind of looked like this. You had one or two large landowners. Well, fast forward, and what we see are those have been fragmented through time. And with that, some of those are posted against trespass. And that brings about a challenge of maintaining these traditional fisheries and acquiring new ones. And so moving forward, we're continuing to work on this routinely of being able to ensure public access on these private lands for these fisheries. And then also I want to take a look back at some of the key regulations that have taken place through time. If we go to 1960, that's when we saw one of the first regulations that were geared towards protecting wild trout. So the self-sustaining trout populations appeared back in 1960. And in 1971, the waters on the Forest Service became public mountain trout waters. So this is technically when we first started hearing public mountain trout waters being used, but that was an important moment in our program. And then in 74, we see that the opening season goes from 5 months to 11 months. And this basically gives us that really popular opening date that we have in place today. So that first Saturday in April, that's so important to a lot of folks fishing hatchery supported waters. It shows up then, and we've basically kept it like that since. And then in 92, there was a major overhaul of the regulation structure, and it gave us the general framework of the waters that we have today. And back then in 92, that's when we got our first delayed harvest. Back then in 92, we had 4. And that, of course, expanded. And then it brought about our catch and release regulations. And then, of course, the other wild waters as well. And then in 05, brought about our first special trout regulation. And that was through Doug's work on Bridgewater tail race. And this is, I highlight this because it gives us the chance to manage these waters where we've got unique situations like Bridgewater, which is the Catawba River below Lake James. And then that picture I showed earlier of Amanda Bouchon holding that really big brown trout, that's Lake Appalachia. And it's also a special regulation water where we can actually tinker with those resources to help accommodate what's there on the ground. All of that gets us to today. Currently, our program has 6 classifications in it. We're managing trout in the western 26 counties of the state. We're at over 5,400 miles, 2,600 acres. We've got a really big trout program, and it's one that has a lot of diversity, and it has a lot of resources, and it has a lot of interest. And I think that it's something that certainly as we look back on where we've been with it, we've definitely done a lot of great things and have a program that's enjoyed by a lot of people. And I've spent quite a bit of time talking, and I like to now take us back to the fish. Talked about the fish up front, the habitat and the people, and take a peek under the water. And the footage I'm about to show is brief, but it's basically what's happening out there in a brook trout stream pretty much this time of year. This footage was taken in late September a few years ago, but just to give us a sense of what's actually going on. It's just a brook trout feeding. And this footage here with the spawning activity, we don't always think about this, but there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of things happening that need to go right. And we see the importance of habitat here with the female fanning out a nest and how clean that gravel needs to be for these trout to continue to reproduce. And so that was taken by one of our technicians. That was one of our brook trout crew. Just on his own, and I really appreciate the value and work that goes into that, and in the end of the day, it really is about the work that all the folks are doing to help make it happen, from the enforcement staff to the hatchery staff to all your support and efforts. Really appreciate it, and at the end of the day, the people, the habitat, the fish in North Carolina are part of our program, and I'm excited. I'm excited about what's next, where we can, but I think the future's bright for the program. So thank you for your time.
Anyone have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Summer.
How many miles of trout stream do we stock?
We're stocking a little over 1,000. That's about 1,200.
And when you talk about the fish we stock, like 750,000 trout or 800,000, how many pounds is that?
Doug?
It's about 600,000.
600,000.
Thank you. Well, what a wonderful presentation.
Other questions, comments? What's the great presentation? Thank you very much. It's time we'll move forward with the agenda. We'll get to rulemaking. And as usual, we'll go through, I'll call it, and we'll go through the rules, and I'll ask for a motion on which exhibits need to be approved. At this time, I'll call on Kristen Waters and the fisheries to present rulemaking, permit rulemaking text for 23-24 annual cycle in the fisheries. Kristen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think this is the last item for me today. So this is the 2023-24 rule proposals for inland fisheries. Exhibit E1, as presented yesterday in the committee of the whole, is the request to notice text for 9 proposed changes for public comment and presentation at public hearings. Exhibit E2 is the associated fiscal note for the proposed changes. Staff recommends approval of Exhibit E1 and Exhibit E2.
At this time, I'd entertain a motion, a second.
Motion.
Second.
Got a motion, who made the motion?
Hayden.
Hayden, second. Any further debate, comments, questions? Hear none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Darren, call you on the text notice, 23-24 annual cycle, name of water access.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so today we have Exhibit F1, Exhibit F2. And exhibit F1 is the proposed amendments to land and water access rules for the 2023-2024 annual cycle. We have 11 proposals here that were covered in the committee of the whole yesterday. And staff is, and then we have exhibit F2, which is the fiscal note for those 11 rules. And staff is recommending notice of text for public notice for comment and presentation at public hearing.
I ask for a motion and second on exhibits F1 and F2. Motion is matter of second. A motion and second. Any further debate or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's time to call for Brad Howard. Permanent rulemaking text notice 23-24 annual cycle wildlife management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be presenting exhibits G1 and G2. Exhibits G1 are the Wildlife Management Division rule proposals as presented yesterday in the committee of the whole meeting. Exhibit G2 is the fiscal note associated with those rules. Mr. Chairman, staff recommends approval of both of these exhibits.
I'll entertain a motion for the approval of exhibits G1 and G2 is presented.
Make a motion.
Motion second. Other questions, debates? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Brad, you'll do the next temporary rule making adoption of CWG.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Exhibit 2 is the action item in Exhibit H2. This is staff's recommending that we move forward with the temporary rule proposal. This will address the CWD surveillance areas and the associated rules for deer hunting in those areas. And staff recommends approval of this temporary rule in this exhibit H2.
So motion and second to approve exhibit H2 is presented.
Second move.
Who made the motion? Steve Wayne, second by Jim Rhodes. Further debate, question? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Move forward, comments by the chairman. I have a few brief comments, things I want to say first. This coming Monday, Commissioners Davis and Seegers and myself have a meeting in Raleigh with Cultural Resources Secretary Reed Wilson and his staff. Thanks, Deputy Jeff Michaels is going to join as well to discuss a proposal on Madam Mesquite. Kelly and our staff, Wes, have been working very hard to put a proposal together, Cultural Resources on to hopefully have a pathway or a plan forward to finally have a pathway forward to resolve our situation and move Madam Mesquite along towards we can get it back into use and a benefit to the community, Hyde County there and surrounding areas, and also to us, that we can use it. A lot of time and effort is going into this proposal. I read it last night, Commissioner Davis. You did a great job, you and your staff, Commissioner Seegers, and I think they've got a great proposal to take Monday to Raleigh, and we'll have an update on that as that progresses. But I just want to give a shout out that the commission know there's a lot of moving parts going on in the commission. You don't see that, and this is one of them. It's important. We've dealt with Madam Mesquite for a long time, and I think from what I've seen since I've been on the commission, this is one of the best opportunities that we have or may have to figure out a path forward for Madam Mesquite. In the December meeting, we had a presentation on the commission's legislative goals, objectives, and our priorities for the upcoming legislative session, which starts in January. We want to get a head start on that. We already have a lot of stuff we're working on, but between now and then, myself, Vice Chairman Bond, we lead the staff, and some of the communication we've already had with commissioners about some items they want to be considered in the agency bill and other priority items for the upcoming legislative session. We'll go over that and make the commissioners aware of that and what that is going to be in December for your input and questions and comments at that time. Also, by the time we meet again in December, I hope that the Marine Fisheries Commission has met and considered the delineation maps, which we have already passed. waters maps that we've already passed, sent over to them. You know, as you all remember, we negotiated these in good faith with Green Fisheries. We had an agreement between the two chairs. This board has already approved it. This commission has already approved it. We're waiting on their approval for their consideration. We hope that happens at the next meeting that they have. We'll have an update with each one, with the commission, you know, the December meeting. Also, we heard a lot about partnerships and relationships during this meeting here in Western North Carolina. It's been very good. Those relationships and partnerships that we have with agencies, and others, non-government organizations here in Western North Carolina are absolutely vital. And not only here, but across the state, particularly in Western North Carolina, to us being able to carry out our vision as Wildlife Resources Commission. But particularly want to say thank you to Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, U.S. Forest Service, the national parks, and local legislators that have met with us. And we've had an opportunity to review those partnerships and the value the Wildlife Commission brings to Western North Carolina. We came up early Monday. Cam and Vice Chairman, a couple of others came up and visited, started visiting our hatcheries on Monday. It's a clearly an economic impact. You just saw it in this presentation. Wildlife, our hatcheries are part of that $383 billion economic impact is driven by $250 billion that's provided by the product out of our hatcheries to that $383 billion. So it is a substantial impact. And as we discussed, we worked on a plan for Setzer and hope to move forward with that. And I'll close by thanking everyone. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of teamwork to have a meeting of our Raleigh. Our staff, Margot, coordinate, Mallory, Todd, every staff member. I'm not going to get into calling names, but a lot goes into it. Doors of their facilities, made that aware of what they bring to the table. And spend a lot of time and extra effort here. We thank them all for that. All the host events last night. I want to thank Vice Chief B. Inslee as our host also for a wonderful event last night for our staff and local folks to get together. So again, a big thank you for all. I left out any names, not mention anybody. I apologize, but except to thank on behalf of the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of brief, I did want to also extend that thank you to several folks that made this happen this week. It's been a great week. This is my first out of Raleigh, if you will, commission meeting with these folks at this table. I think it's really beneficial on many fronts, but before I get into these regions and meeting with our partners and seeing what our staff has done, a lot of key people put these things together that I want to know. That Kyle Briggs, of course, always put these things together, and Henry Russell, helping us get to see what part of this put together for this event. And Todd Mallory, of course, everybody knows how hard they work making this happen. So thank you so much. I can't help you on that front. But anyway, again, the issue manager for hosting us here, and Hayden and Brad for helping put this thing together. And it's just quite a week. And lastly, but you know, this is another example, great example of landscape conservation, where we're working, you know, on our lands, but we're also working with private landowners, and we're working with our other partners, international representatives. There's so many folks, but coming to the western part of the state, it's just a great example of those successes. The wildlife, they recognize it because of the improvements in habitats for game and non-game animals as they draw into those places for their survival and find opportunities to us. Just great work from staff. And I did want to have, while we have the opportunity, for those of you that not met, we've got a new colonel here. We had retired colonel last meeting. We got a new colonel today. Ben Meyer has taken over effective on October 1st. So we welcome Colonel from as wildlife enforcement. And Mr. Chairman,
Other comments?
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, I'd like to thank all the commissioners, staff. I know how hard it is, guys, for you, or I think how much work it takes to do something. You cook dinner in your same kitchen year after year. Now we're trying to prepare a meal. We're moving to a new kitchen. And I just appreciate you guys, the work you put in and the effort to come out here and do this. I think it means a lot. I'm not just speaking for Brad and myself, but to the folks of District 8 and 9. I think they appreciate this. I think it helps our perspectives and of them, and I think it helps their perspectives of us. So Chairman, thank you. Cam, thank you, and to all the staff. It's noted and appreciated.
Any other comments? Everyone have a safe trip home. See you.